And that's part of what we're trying to achieve, is to make it feel like a bit of a movement, but a positive one, where we're focusing on all the good things that people can do by just making these small changes to their diet. For us, it's rather than an afterthought, it's at the heart and centre of everything we do. It's very strange and surreal thinking back to how small and where we started it from, those sort of humble beginnings, to get to where we are now.
Hello and welcome to the Inspiring Industry podcast, where we share our conversations with leaders from industries around the globe. I'm your host, Danielle Champ, and in this episode, we sway slightly from the beaten path as we cover the topic of veganism and its contribution to sustainability in the food and drink industry. For the sake of transparency, and obviously to fulfill stereotypes, I should share that I myself am plant-based. And although this particular journey has been a fairly new one, I was vegetarian for about 7 years before changing my diet even further. And my reasons have been entirely driven by animal rights and not necessarily health issues. However, coming from a family of farmers and South Africa's meat-centric culture, I'm so aware of how divisive this conversation can be. Nonetheless, I think it is such an interesting one. And it's also a topic that has been around for a lot longer than most of us in the West would think about. According to a Time magazine expose, although veganism was coined in 1944, the concept itself dates back to ancient Indian and East Mediterranean cultures. I would also be doing my tribe a complete disservice if I didn't throw out some of the plant-based lifestyle facts, like its proven health benefits, as well as how animal agriculture contributes to over 18% of the global carbon emission footprint. According to an Oxford University study done in 2018, the best way to minimize your impact on the environment is really to go vegan. But statistics aside, in my time, I have seen animal-free lifestyle trends come in ebbs and flows, and personally, one of my concerns is that businesses that purport to advocate in cruelty-free practices and animal-free products do so to grow their customer base. And while we can absolutely argue that, well, hey, at least they're contributing to the solution and not the problem, it undermines the mission vegans are on, which is to end cruelty to animals across the board. Because it's so easy to throw on a sticker and jump on the bandwagon. The real difference, I think, is really in supply chains and certifications and an internal ethos, the practices that extend beyond the packaging of the product. But these are just rants from a fellow vegan, and I could really go on forever. So, to help unpack this conversation, Fine Light's Alex Chesery sat down with local business owner Joe Hill, who co-founded One Planet Pizza with his father. The business specializes in plant-based pizzas, and according to Joe, the company is on a mission to save the world one slice at a time.
The story of One Planet Pizza, if you could sort of introduce that to our listeners as a brand, but also, I suppose, as an ethos from the beginning, which I believe began with making pizzas together as a family with your dad, Mike, at home.
Yeah, our story actually goes way back to the 80s. So my dad, Mike, was a real health fanatic. He went and studied sport at Loughborough Uni and very quickly discovered this incredibly alternative book in the library about adopting a whole foods plant-based diet, which back then was almost unheard of. And he gave it a go with his flatmate at the time and found very quickly that it helped him with his training. And he just loved it. He took it on board and started really feeling the benefits. And then I guess fast forward to when he decided to have 3 kids and settle down with my mum. We were raised with a really interesting, colourful mix of Mike's influence as a sort of health freak, plant-based fanatic back then, and then also my mum coming from an incredibly traditional pig farm in North Norfolk. So yeah, very interesting, vibrant mix of backgrounds growing up and influences. And and really led to me and my sister at a very young age being aware of and making the connection between these animals that we were seeing on my grandparents' farm and the food on our plates. And just deciding really at the age of about 10 that we didn't want to eat these animals and actually wanted to sort of follow in our dad's footsteps. And that was really the genesis. That was where, the idea really, laid tracks in my head, and Mike had already been there for some time. And then I guess the next, the big landmark was that we had always been having pizza night every Friday night. It was a real family tradition for us growing up. But it got to the point where we started to realise that Mike was never able to add any cheese to his pizzas, whereas us kids were always loading them with dairy cheese and noticing that he was missing out and that there was nothing out there for him as an alternative, which was quite sad when we were young to see. If you're happy, I'll bring you forward in time. And I guess I turned vegan again around the same time as my sister when I was about early 20s, and I just made that connection between the animals and the dairy industry in particular, and what I was putting in my body. And really only about a year or two after going vegan, Mike came to me and said he's got this business idea. He thinks, the vegan market was finally ready for it, and that, the world needed a decent frozen vegan pizza that we knew was missing way back when we were growing up as kids.
I love it. We do have a lot of business leaders listening. Obviously, the name is Inspiring Industry, and it's certainly an inspiring story. I was hoping maybe you could touch on the sort of behind the scenes aspect of that growth, because I know recently you've gone through this transition to change your manufacturing facilities to a place in Holland.
When we started the company back in 2016, me and Mike always wanted to make these pizzas ourselves from scratch. That was always, our passion was food and using fresh ingredients, locally sourced, and really making them healthier by having full control over what we were putting into our recipes. So we created 4 flavors to replicate the most popular meat and dairy traditional pizzas and hopefully make that swap easier for people. And really up until the start of this year, we were producing them ourselves, albeit with a larger team. So for the first year or two, it was just me and Mike. And then, very quickly we started hiring and building our team up and getting new equipment and eventually having a purpose-built kitchen here in Norfolk, where we could fit about 20 members of staff and operate quite a large scale. But we were finding that we were really wanting to reach that next stage of growth and scale rapidly, because we know the demand's still there, and we want to get into more than just one major retailer and more than just one country. And really that our own production site was holding us back. And it got to the point towards the end of last year and start of this year where we realized that actually, if we want to make this big, we want to become a household name, a global brand, then either you invest heavily, large amounts of money and build another larger factory yourself, which would involve spending quite a lot of money on large equipment, hiring a lot more people, and would probably be quite costly and time consuming. It would take years to get that over the finish line. And really, we wanted to move a lot faster than that. So partly driven by Brexit, but also recently the cost of living crisis and the rising energy costs and ingredient costs meant that we made this decision a lot faster than we normally would have anticipated. So we started going out there and looking for a contract manufacturer very quickly last year, and soon realized that actually the benefits to outsourcing our production into mainland Europe in somewhere like Holland had far more advantages than staying within the UK. Unfortunately, as much as we wanted to, we had to, make the best decision for the business. So we actually found a really good partner over near Eindhoven in Holland, incredibly well positioned in mainland Europe to help us enter, at least 5 or 6 other European countries very quickly, but also can deliver and transport back into the UK 5 days a week. So the benefits, hugely outweighed staying in the UK and trying to go at it ourselves. So yeah, it was a very quick decision, but we're now in the final stages, and we'll have this new production switched on in the next couple of weeks now, which is really exciting.
Let's talk about the range of pizzas themselves. Maybe you could tell us, what's on offer, and maybe how this new facility, the new production, might influence the scope of the range.
Our current range is a margarita, a pepperoni, a Hawaiian, and a med veg. And we're actually now upgrading the range. So the new range will be a new and improved base. So we're moving over to a sourdough wood-fired stone-baked base, which we think helps us justify a slightly higher price than the average frozen pizza, but does come with benefits to the quality of the final product, and also comes with its own health benefits as well. So we really wanted to keep ourselves healthy but tasty, which we think sourdough allows us to achieve. So improved base, we're actually moving over to a new cheese partner. So we found a really good partner over in Holland again called Willicroft. So they're the world's only B Corp plant-based cheese producer, which is pretty impressive. They've got really huge plans to scale rapidly as well over the next few years. And they do a range of incredible tasting and very importantly for us, very well melting cheeses. So we're going to use their young Dutch cheese on all of our pizzas going forwards. And then our new range is going to be a margarita and pepperoni still, and a Hawaiian with a Levy bacon from France, and then actually swapping out our med veg for a spicy Tex-Mex with the new cheese. And again, this was based on consumer insights and looking at food trends going ahead. So positioning that range to try and appeal to as many consumers as possible, not just vegans, but also those meat lovers and flexitarians out there.
Looking at veganism in this episode as a whole, which is why we're spotlighting One Planet Pizza. You've shared your family's veganism story. Why is it so important to embed that within the company you created? Because there's lots of people that have certain beliefs or values, but they're sort of kept private. And when they go into a commercial venture, they might not translate those into that company. Why was it so important for you and Mike?
It's always been a huge part of who we are and what we believe in. So from day one, we wanted One Planet Pizza to be purpose-driven, a mission-driven brand that has a clear end goal, which for us has always been to remove animals from the food chain. And it just so happens that that's pizza for us, which we think was a logical starting point. Go for one of the most popular foods across the whole world, veganize it, keep it tasty, make it healthier, and then show people all of the benefits for swapping over, even if that's once a week or once a month. So for us, our mission has always been clear, and that's our end goal. And really, when we looked at the competitive analysis and who else was out there doing similar things, but also not just within vegan pizza, but meat and dairy pizzas as a whole, it's a very traditional food sector. It's been around for a long time. Frozen is now, very much in a state of growth, which is great to see for various reasons, but it's still quite old-fashioned, and we're still breaking down quite a lot of old barriers that are up. And a lot of it's around the fact that, this industry is dominated by 3 or 4 huge global corporate brands. And so we're coming in as an incredibly small challenger brand, very young in our infancy, still trying to make a name for ourselves and break through and make some space on those shelves. And one of the ways we think we can do that is by being unique and by having, this mission and this story. So, talking and championing the fact that we're a small family business, father and son owned and led, and also, focusing on the fact that we are a 100% vegan brand. It's not just something that we would do because we think we can make some money or, following the trends that are out there in the food sector because we think we can get some volume through. So for us, it's rather than an afterthought, it's at the heart and center of everything we do. And that's, translates across all of our messages and packaging and socials. And really, it's that story and that mission that we think sets us apart within our space in the freezer. And we find that, people increasingly now are really looking for brands that have a story and, where they have, something unique about them and they are mission driven and trying to make the world a better place. And we think that's pretty unique in our category. So we're going to, own it and really shout about it from the rooftops.
Is there something about that father and son relationship, that core family dynamic that goes all the way back to growing up together, Friday night, pizza night? Is there something that you think within that relationship has given One Planet Pizza that special quality that can push it through and break through into this industry that's dominated by 3 or 4 sort of big corporate faceless brands?
Yeah, I do believe so. I mean, we've now been doing this for 6 or 7 years, and this is, the feedback we get is that this family story does resonate with people and they are willing to spend a bit more and support us. And, not just with family and friends, but people who have been following our story for all these years now, they do stick with you, and that loyalty can't be bought or replicated. And they do feel like they're part of our journey and almost part of our extended family, because they've watched us grow over all these years and make mistakes and face challenges and build and rebuild and pivot the brand. So they really feel like they've taken part in that story. And that's kind of part of what we're trying to achieve, is to make it feel like a bit of a movement, but a positive one, where we're focusing on all the good things that people can do by just, making these small changes to their diets. We like to think it can be quite empowering for individuals if they start to understand and learn about how, the simple food choices they make every day can actually combine to make a pretty big change to their carbon emissions, their carbon footprint, which we think is pretty incredible. So that's kind of that's what we're all about, and I like to think that people really get that, and we make the message pretty clear, but also quite fun and engaging and empowering. And so we've never really stopped talking about the fact we're father and son, because people seem to love it, and it does stick. When I think about classic brands that have done such an incredible job over the years, someone like Ben & Jerry's, they are a couple of mates, and when you think of the brand, you think of the product, but you also think of these two friends who built it all those years ago. I picture that every time I see their ice cream, and I think they still have a small picture of them on the back of packs, which we do as well. And I think people like to think they're buying from people and not just from big corporates. So for us, that's brilliant if we can use that to our advantage, but also to help spread this message. And I think when it's a family, it's just that much stronger as well.
I'm sure you've heard the joke, how do you know if someone's vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you. And it's almost like in the public discourse, the word vegan almost prompts conversation to grind to a halt, because some people hear it and it's like, no, that's not for me. And that's totally fine. However, I'm curious about your demographic and your actual buyers. I'm wondering whether you could share, because obviously a vegan pizza isn't just for vegan people. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how you are breaking down those stereotypes and that fixed response that a lot of people have.
Yeah, really interesting challenge we're facing is that you're absolutely right that the mass majority of people out there who are buying food every day in supermarkets and small shops are not vegan. They're not flexitarian. They're what we loosely term as, meat eaters or meat lovers or carnivores. And really, they make up over 80% of the population, 70 to 80%. And so we can't ignore that if we want to be a big, well-known, established brand, and we want to sell as many pizzas as possible, essentially, we need to be finding out very creative and clever ways to start bringing those majority of consumers into the plant-based categories. And that's a similar challenge for all plant-based brands. And a similar challenge, but not so extreme, is the case for the flexitarians who are still on the fence. So they're a slightly bigger chunk of the population. These are the people who have like a meat-free Monday or are open to having conversations about veganism, but don't want to label themselves, but probably would occasionally buy a vegan pizza if they thought it was healthier or better for the planet, or looks quite appealing for whatever reason. So that's one of our big challenges as an industry, is how to win over the majority. I mean, some of the ways we're doing that are making sure that we use the right language and terminology. Probably most importantly is on the actual boxes themselves, because that's that's the first time that someone new will see our brand and come to see who we are and what we're doing. And really, so we have to be quite conscious about how many times we're using the word vegan. So, for example, we put plant-based pizza on the front and center, and you probably would read that before you'd see the vegan trademark. And we think that has fewer negative connotations to people who don't know about this way of living. And we want it to be a bit more sort of open and welcoming, and rather than exclusive to vegans. And then really we just focus on making the brand and the copy as fun as possible. So, putting puns in there, putting jokes in there, not taking ourselves too seriously. Yes, we're on a mission to help, save the planet, but it is pizza at the end of the day. And we have to remember that people are buying these because, it's probably a Friday evening and they want to treat themselves and they don't want to think too much about cooking and they just want something that tastes good. So that's kind of that's where we spend a lot of time, is making sure that the language we're using and how we're communicating to those end users is appropriate and isn't going to put anyone off who potentially is coming to it brand new.
I had a family friend who was running a cafe, and they sourced all their cakes from a local vegan baker, and they were so impressed with them because they tasted so amazing and they were vegan. So they would put a sign up saying vegan cakes, and they really didn't sell many. So they thought, after a few weeks, take the vegan sign away. Suddenly people are buying them. Oh, these are the best cakes I've ever had. So it just goes to show that it is a really interesting topic, how that sort of psychological barrier that obviously still exists can affect a brand and how you have to market a product.
Yeah, I'll never forget when we've always done a lot of sampling out in the streets and outside of shops, usually when the weather's a bit better. And we did it in Norwich, which is still where we operate from. And there was an old chap came along and asked what we were doing, and we gave him a slice of pizza, and he ate it in front of us and started telling us how much he loved it and how great it tasted. And then we told him it was vegan, and you could just see in his face that he was really struggling because he had already told us how he felt, and he sort of did a U-turn and said, actually, I don't think I like that, and walked off. And it's just amazing how powerful those stereotypes are when you see them at work. So really, a lot of, and very much like your anecdote, is convincing people that the taste is there. That's the main thing. You have to get people to try it, and it has to taste good. And then you can work on, the other very important purchasing factors and, the things that will drive people to make these decisions.
Let's talk a bit about where people can find the brand and taste it for themselves. I think I first came across One Planet Pizza in the Little Shop of Vegans, which if you've been to Norwich, you might know is a small independent vegan store. So I was just wondering, obviously, starting with probably many of those smaller, also local, independent vegan businesses. But now I also know that obviously you're in the process of doing a new deal with Asda, which is obviously a huge supermarket chain. How does that process of distribution change, and how can you ensure that mission statement of the brand stays consistent?
Yeah, it's been a real challenge for us, is growing quickly, but staying true to who we are and where we came from. And I like to think we've done a pretty good job at that. I mean, no brand is perfect. In an ideal world, we would have kept the production in the UK locally and sourced more local ingredients. But unfortunately, external environment just hasn't allowed us to do that. And it was either move abroad and survive and then grow, or probably sink if you stay in the UK. So that was quite a bit of pill for us to swallow. But when you think about, what's most important, and it is survival, then, you have to be willing to adapt and compromise sometimes. So we're quite sad to see production leave the UK, but to some extent it was out of our control by this point in time. I guess when it comes to scaling up and working with the likes of Asda, so we started with, it literally went from me filling up the back of a freezer van and driving around Norfolk, and then eventually driving around probably half of the UK, delivering to about 100 shops. And I would literally go in and fill up the freezer myself, and then sign off and give them a little delivery note and meet all of these small independent shop owners. And that really was invaluable in the early years, just helping us learn directly about what was driving people to buy these pizzas, how much you could charge, to reach the most people, and then really getting the feedback from people themselves about the quality and the range. So we've always tried to really sort of respect and stay in touch and support the independents. So one of the ways we're doing that is we're launching through our sort of three main wholesalers at the same time the new range is introduced in Asda. And we're going to come up with a campaign specifically for the independents, which we've always done. In the past, usually we try and do it in line with Veganuary. And we're hoping we can do another. We once did a really popular road show where we went and toured 100 or so of these shops over 3 or 4 weekends and do sampling, but also just go and meet these shop owners and find out how we can support them and help them essentially sell more pizzas and support them in store. So that's something that's always on our mind. And the challenge now is, how do we navigate doing that whilst also supporting, the bigger retail customers, which is a challenge, keeping them all happy at the same time. But one of the things we're doing is not just ignoring, the smaller independent shops, because that's essentially allowed us to get to this point in time. So we do owe them from those early years. There's no doubt.
Being stocked by Asda's obviously been a giant success and a giant leap forward. I understand you were part of their incubator program, which they launched to work with more sustainable businesses. I thought for either business owners listening or potential business owners listening, maybe you could tell us a bit about that experience and how it helped the brand break through.
Yeah, so for years now, we've been ready to secure that first major listing, which is what we were working towards. I guess for a long time, that involved just cold calling all the buyers, like most brands have to. And it's just very painful when there's no guarantee of success and you don't know how long it's going to take, but you have to just keep chipping away at them and trying to reach them in creative ways. And if you find another brand that knows them, then try and, get yourself an intro indirectly. And that did take some time, and we got some progress and then some setbacks, and then the buyers change. And it felt like it went on for a painfully long time. But eventually, it did pay off, and Asda did come back to us once and they said, we've got this new scheme. We think you're suitable, and the focus is on sustainability and, brands within the UK in particular and plant-based. So it was a case of almost being in the right place at the right time. But if you're not knocking on those doors week after week and doing it for months, then you're probably not going to get these opportunities. So we then obviously grabbed it and went full steam ahead and committed to it. And interestingly, the scheme itself was, I think they'd admit that it wasn't too successful and it wasn't executed properly or effectively. And for that reason, they've pulled it. And actually, I don't think you'll see it again for some time. Whereas Sainsbury's and Tesco, have a very successful incubator, and they've been doing it for some time now. But we were fairly lucky in that we were within the frozen brands that were on this incubator. And I think there were only 3 or 4 of us. And off the back of that, we were put into 50 stores. But because we were in the frozen sector, it was much easier to find us in those stores, whereas all the ambient and chilled brands were put and spread across, anywhere and everywhere within store that had some space, which made it almost impossible for them to hit the rate of sale they needed to get a listing. So again, probably just got a bit lucky, but we did put a lot of money and support into the incubator, and most of our marketing was aimed at making sure we got this incubator right the first time. Yeah, we must have done enough, and we hit the rate of sale that they were happy with, and off the back of it won the national listing, which started in January. They took one SKU, but out into 400 stores, and we had a meeting with them last week, and they're very happy with the rate of sale, and we're now looking at promotions for the year ahead, and then pushing very hard for a second SKU in January and support it with a big January push. Really, our learning is that there's no guarantee, and you have to just keep plugging away and keep cold calling, but doing it in creative ways and really trying to understand how you can solve the buyer's problems, because they do change, every 6 months or so.
The topic of this episode ties into our wider deep dive into sustainability, which it really is the buzzword of every industry at the minute. And with a name like One Planet Pizza, you're obviously putting that to the fore. I've got a couple of statistics to share, which, One Planet Pizzas have 47% lower carbon emissions than standard sort of equivalents you might see in the shop. You're also the first frozen pizza brand to put carbon labels on their pizza boxes, which is a huge deal, especially with that visual traffic light system, which makes it quite easy for people to understand. My Emissions said, One Planet Pizza are leading the way on climate transparency. We can't wait to see the response, what the response will be to these labels in store. So I suppose my first question around that is, what has the response been? What are your customers saying? What are your retailers saying about these incredible statistics and what you're doing for the environment?
Yeah, it's really hard to know, because it's still early days for us. So this is something we're desperate to find out, but will take some time. But very initially, I think that when we pitched to Asda, our focus was all on sustainability, assuming that the taste and the price was there. Really then for us, it was just convincing them that this was the most sustainable pizza brand and they need to list us, because this is what's important to people at the moment. And it's probably not going away. And so I think, talking about these benefits and, what makes us special, the carbon scores, the stats we've had calculated for us, and we even put those on the back of pack. I think all these things combined to really help us secure that listing, because it was really a focus for Asda to bring in more sustainable brands to help them achieve their goals around it. So I think it's already been invaluable, which is it's important to us because it's not something we would change, but we're lucky that it's now starting to resonate with these buyers and, retailers as well as consumers. When we look at the research, it does look like most people are buying our pizzas for a friend or family above anything else, which really surprised us. So it means that we're probably touching 2 people rather than 1, and people who are buying these pizzas may not be buying them for themselves. So it's a good opportunity to try and actually engage with second person rather than the person just buying it to eat it directly. And also we're finding that the main reason people are buying vegan pizzas is actually for their health more than anything. So they're associating plant-based food with being lower in fat, salt and sugar, which most of the time is correct, and it is for the pizzas. And then I guess a close second will be sustainability. So after they buy a plant-based pizza because they know or assume it's healthier, I guess then what's most important to them after that is the fact that it's going to be better for the planet. And a lot of the time, plant-based has a halo effect. Generally now the average consumer knows that if they buy more plant-based foods, it's going to be better for the planet and better for their health. But really, we need to quantify or qualify that by putting these numbers, putting these stats and educating them on pack, and then also bring them to the website to teach them more about it. So it's definitely early days for us, but it's something we're learning and improving all the time as we've got this major listing now. So the next step will be B Corp, which we know is a very very fast growing and exciting place to be for brands. Is that journey towards B Corp?
In my mind, at least, there are sort of 2 different ways that companies approach sustainability. Either it's directly embedded in their core product and their core mission; they live and breathe it, so to speak. And then there's sort of the other side of it, where a company will sort of do what they were always doing, but really heavily invest in offsetting their business. They're not actually interested in changing the core processes and the core product that are negatively impacting the environment. You mentioned earlier about partnering with this new cheese supplier and made a point to point out that they were a B Corp. How important is it for you to work with these fellow businesses, especially vegan businesses, who directly share your goals and your vision and I suppose effectively lift each other up?
Yeah, it's a massive advantage for us. We've worked with vegan cheese brands probably about 3 or 4 over the years. And really what's led us to these guys right now is obviously a location. It needed to be fairly near our new Dutch-based production company. That was important. But really what gets us most excited is the fact that we could choose the most sustainable partner. It only strengthens our messages and our impact if we can combine forces with someone who's doing the same thing. And it's brilliant because not only are they B Corp, but they have done this really interesting, slightly quirky initiative where they've appointed someone totally separate from the business to represent Mother Nature as their CEO. So it's a good PR stunt, but they have legitimately done it. And whenever they come to make big decisions within the business about their future, they do try and have someone represent, Mother Nature independently to make sure what they're doing has, positive impact on the planet and people and overall health. And, that's something that we aspire towards. And they're probably a little bit ahead of us, definitely on having B Corp. So it's only going to have a halo effect, and it's going to push us to go further with our sustainability goals, which is what we wanted. And amazingly, they're one of the only plant-based cheese brands in the world to use haricot beans, white beans, as they call them. And it makes up a percentage of the cheese, but also allows them to work with local farmers, educate and help them understand, why we should be focusing on plants for our protein. And then they put these messages on pack, which are similar to ours, about how much better their product is versus the cheese counterpart within the dairy aisle. So the educational part for the consumers is really important for us, and it seems like they're already doing that, which is great. So once we're up and running, we're going to start coming up with a bit of a joint marketing plan to help reach, hopefully twice as many people with very similar messages.
United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, Iceland, France, Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Greece, Malta, and Cyprus. These are all the places that you're now distributing to. What's that change like just from a mental point of view, overseeing a company, spearheading a company, going from loading up your van and driving it around the small city of Norwich to now distributing it across numerous different countries?
I always struggle to put it into words because I haven't really come to terms with it myself. I guess, it's just all a bit of a blur since we started it. And I guess without sounding too cheesy, it does feel like, what me and Mike were put here to do. It feels like it's our purpose, and we feel 100% satisfied when we're doing it every day, day in, day out. But yeah, it's very strange and surreal. Thinking back to how small and where we started it from, those sort of humble beginnings, to get to where we are now, and we appreciate we're still a very small brand when we compare ourselves to who we're up against in the UK and beyond. But it's been great fun, and we've had such an incredible journey to get to this point that it does feel it's quite empowering and motivating because we have had an incredibly tough 6 to 12 months. With all of the huge global events that have impacted small businesses, they probably don't need all naming, but it goes without saying that it's been more challenging recently than ever in the past, and the fact that we've been through all of that gives us confidence that we need to push the team forwards and to really keep growing, keep scaling, and keep pushing.
If we were to sit down again in a few years' time and have a catch up, what would you like to be able to tell me that you'd achieved yourself at the company, but also One Planet Pizza as a whole?
Really, for us, I'd like to be sitting down with you and saying that we managed to move production to the Netherlands successfully, whilst keeping all of our customers happy, introduced a new improved range, which is better for the planet, healthier and tastier at the same time. And really, maintained our Asda listing, but also one or two major listings in the UK. Our other big target is to get at least one or two major listings in the retailers in the Netherlands, France, and Germany. So they're all in our sites, and that's really the focus for the next 6 to 12 months is to get those listings. So we're being very ambitious, but also quite realistic. Focusing on a few countries, but the ones that probably have the biggest appetite for plant-based pizza. And then also, interestingly, we've closed our office here in the UK ahead of the production move. But really, for me, it's important to keep our small but incredibly valuable team very motivated and happy within their work environment as they move to working more remote. So that's a big focus for me over the next 3 to 6 months. And then moving forwards, part of what we're focusing on is becoming a bigger global brand. So we want to spend a lot more time making sure our messages are clear and concise. And I want to really focus on harnessing the storytelling of the brand to make sure that we're reaching as many of those carnivores and meat lovers, as I mentioned before, as possible, so that we can try and really, not just for our brand, but for all the other plant-based brands doing amazing things, is to bring those new potential customers into the category would be one of our biggest achievements if we can start to do that, because I think we've satisfied the vegans within the UK at least, and now most of our pizzas are being bought by those flexitarians, which is great. So if we're thinking even bigger, then it will be to keep all of these customers happy, but then also start to bring in some of those meat lovers to the category. If you consider within food what's happened recently that's caused these huge shifts in consumer attitudes, on the one hand, we've got the fact that we've all come out the other side of this pandemic, and COVID has changed things and taken us down a different path. So within the food industry, post-COVID, we know that more consumers than ever before are concerned about their health and also making that connection between their health and the food they're eating and buying, which is fantastic for the plant-based industry. And we're seeing those benefits in the data at the moment. And also this increasing fear and lack of trust within the meat and dairy categories, which essentially are the cause and concern for future pandemics. So these are all facts that are now out there and are being talked about a lot more than they were before, and driving people to plant-based for those reasons, which is fantastic. And at the same time, we are going through this cost of living crisis. post-pandemic, and that's also causing people to purchase food based on, the limited amount of money they have to spend, and also with the rising costs, people are starting to eat out less. For example, they're starting to, instead of buy a takeaway pizza for 15 quid, they're thinking about coming over to the chilled and frozen aisle and buying one for 4 or 5 quid. And really, it's value, and it's, how much can you get for your money, how affordable products are. And that's driving a lot of people into the frozen aisle, which for years and years, only a very small percentage of people were going to the frozen aisle, and it was destination shopping, for 3 or 4 products they had on their list. They only needed those, peas, etc., and then they'd leave. So all these changes are happening at the moment, really positively impacting the plant-based sector as a whole, but then also within frozen, which is, again, very fortunate for us, and we appreciate that. And it's largely out of our control, but it gives us this incredible opportunity that we should be seizing and taking ownership of as much as possible. So yeah, for us, we're really focusing on those people who wouldn't call themselves vegan or vegetarian, but are making these food choices based on the planet and their health. And I really think that's where the future is that more of these conscious consumers will be driven to the plant-based category. And I think there is still much more growth ahead. We just probably have to bear in mind they're not going to be vegans. In an ideal world, they all would be, but I think we just have to be realistic and manage those expectations.
Listening to Joe and Alex's conversation, I was reminded of how much more important consumer awareness has become. I think loads of consumers are becoming more critical of where they're spending their money, and are also choosing to support businesses with dependable values and practices. So for me, I think the conversation around veganism contributes to the global conversation of ethics. For example, if you're a dairy farmer out in the sticks of South Africa, are your cows being looked after well? And can you be held accountable for their treatment? In the same breath, if you're a vegan cosmetic business in London, are your staff being paid well and treated fairly? I think these conversations are one and the same, and business leaders would do well to be mindful of their values and the extent to which those values apply. And it sounds like One Planet Pizza is on the journey to doing just that. That's all from us. We'd like to extend a massive thank you to Joe Hill for joining us. And if you like what you hear, why not give us a like and hit subscribe? We'll see you next month, where we share more conversations with leaders from industries around the globe. This podcast is brought to you by Fine Light Media. Inspiring Industry is hosted and written by Danielle Champ, produced and edited by Alex Cesare, art and design Charlie Prothero. Amy Jilks is our guest booking manager, Rain Cockburn, our head of marketing, and Rosie Clegg, our social media executive. Finally, we'd like to extend a special thanks to our magazine editor, Libby Hammond, and assistant editor, Mary Float. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Fine Light Media and its team.